Salutations. Welcome to Oxyword, and I'm your host, Joel Wilborn. In this episode, we return to Mission Creek Correction Center for Women, and we have a young lady who is explaining rehabilitation and some of the conditions that she has to face while in prison. So please sit back and enjoy Oxyword. On the line, I have a young lady who is currently incarcerated at Mission Creek Correction Center for Women. Will you please state your name?
My name's Erica Bundy.
Okay, now, do you think sentencing guidelines need to change?
Sentencing guidelines? Yeah, I do believe that they should change. I think that they give a lot of time for drug offenses, and I think that they're wasting space in prison. I'm not saying that drug offenders shouldn't be incarcerated, but I'm saying the length of their incarcerations are sometimes not fitting for the crimes, and I think that they're refusing or maybe perhaps forgetting to take into consideration the fact that it is a disease. And I think that with addiction, I believe that when you're actively using, I feel like that's when the disease part comes into play, because regardless of the fact that you shouldn't be doing that, you know that there's better ways you could be spending your life, and you know sometimes, in some cases, the things that people do for those drugs are not right, and it goes against everything that they have been taught in life and that they know to be right. You can't. It's. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's really hard to pull yourself out of that. You can be the smartest individual in the world, and I think that's where the disease part comes in. But I think that once you pluck somebody out, I think that prison is good for incarcerated people, or addicts, because I feel like it pulls them out in ways that they wouldn't otherwise be able to pull themselves out. And I think that for me personally, I dried out every time that I get clean. This is my second prison stay, and that's the only thing that's going to be able to pull me out of actively using and being in that addict lifestyle. I did try to go to treatment one time, but I wasn't successful. I never actually made it through the doors. So, you don't have a choice but to go through the doors in prison. And I think that, once you get 6 months to a year under your belt, if you have the mindset to be done with it, which a lot of people, they want the chance, I think that giving somebody a 3, 8, 12 year prison sentence for drugs, I think that's a little bit unnecessary. They say that it takes the average person 7 times in rehab to actually fully function and be rehabilitated. So I think sometimes people just have to learn from their mistakes, and sometimes you need a couple more chances, basically. So, giving people excessive time for silly drug violations and stuff, I think that is not really benefiting anybody. It's not benefiting the system, and it's not benefiting the individuals, and it's not benefiting the community either.
Well, what about your sentence? Is your sentence just?
Honestly, I feel that it is. I was sentenced to 30 months for selling drugs, and, I think that it is fair.
Now, do you believe there's some incarcerated people in that prison who should not be released?
Should not be. I think that the only people who, I'm not going to say that they can't be rehabilitated, but I'm going to say that the risk is not worth the reward of putting them back into society, and for the possibility of them recommitting a similar offense is going to be people with child crimes. And I think that really just speaks for itself. I think that, especially people obviously people do things that they wouldn't normally do when they're high on drugs. So, there might be violent offenders. But I think that if you take the drugs out of the scenario, a lot of these violent offenders probably wouldn't be so violent. But I think that as far as like not getting another chance, I think that when it comes to child crimes and, hurting children, I think that, it shouldn't take many. I think 3 strikes you're out is even, a little bit forgiving or soft. I think that if you harmed 3 children, then that's 3 lives that you potentially ruined, and I don't think that that's fair to the children to keep letting people get out and keep trying,
Now, when we're talking about violent offenders and we're talking about drug addicts that need some special training, education, classes, do you believe violent offenders can be rehabilitated, or do you believe that addicts and habitual criminals, you think any of these hardcore people that the public would like to see locked up for many, many years, do you think these people have a chance of getting out and changing their life?
I think in a lot of cases they absolutely do. I think that, sometimes people make mistakes. I don't know what the circumstances involve, or, maybe they are just weak-minded people and they got involved with the wrong kind of people. But I think a lot of the times I do believe that it's not the person, it's the circumstances. I think that there's certainly cases where, maybe it is the person and, maybe they were bred into it, or maybe they, that's what they grew up, they don't know any better. I'm not really sure, but I do know that there are some violent cases that I personally know that it involves, drugs are involved, and, you're not the same person. Some people aren't exactly the same people. They make different choices than they would if they weren't using drugs, and I think that should be taken into consideration. And if somebody is actively pursuing rehabilitation, then I think that they stand a better chance than somebody that's not, or maybe, somebody that just is acting violently, because that's their natural inclination to do so.
Do you believe in law and order?
Do I believe in law and order?
Yes.
I do. I have to. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are wrong with the justice system, but without it, what would we really have, I have to believe that there's a lot of things that are wrong with it, but there are the people that care and, that really are fighting for justice, and so, I have to believe in law and order.
Now, usually when we think of violent offenders, we don't associate them with being a woman. I think if the general question were to come out...
Say that one more time?
Usually, when we consider the sentence of a violent offender, we don't associate them with being a woman. And so...
violent offenders?
Right, violent offenders.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
So do you think female violent offenders, and that includes sex offenders and people who are serial killers, do you think they should be treated any differently than their counterparts in the male prisons?
I don't think that they should. I think that, well, I guess that really depends, honestly, because I know a good number of women that are doing a good number of years for a crime that, they may have participated in. To what extent, I don't really know, but what I do is that they're significant others, or they were in a group or something like that, and the case is that they wouldn't tell on whoever the person involved was. And so, a lot of times when somebody doesn't give information like the prosecutors want, it doesn't really make the prosecutors happy. So the prosecutors obviously threaten them with more time, and inevitably they live up to their word, and they do in fact get more time typically, than they would otherwise. But do I think that they should be treated any different than the men? No, I think that it's a case-by-case basis, and I think that I just know personally, I don't know about men's prison, but what I do know is that, I've heard of cases, like I said, where women are typically getting treated harsher or just as harsh as the people that, actually actively committed the violent offense.
Now, you've been in prison for quite a while now. Is there a reason that we should let you out early?
Me in particular?
Yes, you in particular.
I'm currently in a program. It's a drug program, and it's focused basically on rehabilitating drug addicts. And the way that I feel about it is, regardless of whether or not I was actively engaged in this program or not, I'm just at the point in my life, and I'm at the point in my lifestyle to where, I know that there's more things out there for me, and that this was not my intended purpose for being placed on this earth. And so I think that whether or not I get let out tomorrow, or whether or not I get let out next year, which is my release date, I intend on actively pursuing my purpose in life. And I think that my case, like most other people's cases with drugs and stuff, I think that, at times they can be a little harsh on the punishing scale, which I'm not saying that we don't deserve to be punished. I understand completely where, I went wrong and, the effects that I've had on other people. But I think that sometimes you have to make mistakes to learn from them. And you can't learn from your mistakes without, getting the chance to try again, basically.
Are you considered a violent offender yourself?
No, not at all. I don't have been in prison or out of prison. I don't have violent tendencies, and nowhere in any of my records is it indicative of anything like that either.
Now, prison is a good place to fester trauma. There's a lot of trauma that comes out of there. Do you feel comfortable being housed with people who are violent offenders?
In my current situation, yes, I do. I can understand why people wouldn't. I personally, I get along with most people. I don't typically have problems anywhere that I go. So it's not really a problem for me. If I was somebody else, then, maybe a little lippier, maybe a little less respectful, I could understand where problems could arise. But the prison that I'm in is a really, minimum security prison. And there's not so many inmates as, opposed to staff and stuff. They got a pretty good staff to inmate ratio here, and there's not really many places where incidents could occur. So I guess in a sense we are fortunate for that. But I could see how that could be a problem in a bigger prison, absolutely. And maybe I would feel a little bit less comfortable there. But at the end of the day, I know boundaries, and I know, what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And I have a pretty good, I'm able to read people, and I just, if I don't vibe with that person, I typically tend to stay away. So personally speaking, no, I don't have a problem with it, but I could absolutely see how other people would.
Now, as far as being released and getting back into society, it looks like the current system isn't really working the way people had planned. They figured that you'd commit a crime, go to prison, find the error of your ways, and get out and be a completely different person and never go back. What do you think we can do to reduce people going back to prison?
I think that maybe what could have been done in my situation was requiring drug treatment, because once I was sober for 18 months, and then once I fell off it, I dealt with death and dying. That was kind of close to me, that's nothing I've been familiar with. I've never had to deal with that. So, I was weak and I resorted to old behaviors, that's emotion's biggest trick. And, I didn't know how to deal with that at the time. So I went back to what I knew, the easy way to numb out my feelings and void my thoughts. But once I started going back, I tried to pull myself out of it a few times, but then once I ran out of Swiss insertions for DOC and I started getting more and more lengths of time, then I just went on the run and I, had the mentality of, I'll ride this till the wheels fall off. And I think that, and which eventually, of course, led me into multiple more charges and all drug-related offenses, and eventually, another prison stay. But I believe that if somewhere in between all that, if they would have required me to go to treatment, and, given me, a 30, 60, 90-day time to dry out, I think that that's really, what I needed more than anything else at the time, because all I needed was the time to dry out and get because, 20, 15, 30-day sentences, yeah, you dry out a little bit, but all you're thinking about is getting back out there and hitting the ground running again. And that's just dead time, you're not learning, in a squally jail or, just county jails and stuff like that. There's not really much opportunity. All you're doing is sitting and existing. You're not learning anything. You're not, the best you get is, TV and maybe conversation with a few other like-minded people. And into those situations, the like-minded people, they're really relating to drugs. It's not really like profound or intellectual conversations very often, unless you're really fortunate. But I think that if in my little couple of year run of riding until the wheels fall off, I think that if they would have sent me to a rehab or, detox center for anywhere between 30 to 90 days, I think that would have absolutely been everything that I needed, and it would have set me up for success. Because I didn't want to be doing what I was doing, but I just, it's just the nature of actively doing drugs. As much as you don't want to, you just, at some point, you don't know what else to do. That's just all you know, and change is scary at times. So I think if they would have sent me to a treatment center, which usually at treatment centers, they help you transition back to society and stuff. They help you get set up living situations and stuff like that, halfway houses, whatever. Then that would have made absolutely like a life or death situation.
So what are your plans when you walk out those doors?
When I walk out the doors, it depends whether or not I'm currently eligible for GRE, but because I'm in this treatment program right now, I have a therapeutic hold. I have a TC hold. And so, unfortunately, what that means for me is I am getting therapy in here to the best of their abilities, but I think that the most important thing for incarcerated individuals with drug habits, I think the most beneficial thing for them to have is to be able to transition out into society, because you can learn.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
You can learn everything that you want to learn in a place inside, in a sheltered environment, but all we're really doing in this program is, I feel like, give people a false sense of hope. Like once, they can, drop an awareness on somebody that when they get out of prison, they'll be just fine and they can, their addiction won't get the best of them. But, so yeah, I plan on continuing with the treatment and
you have 30 seconds remaining.
Hoping to get into a halfway house or an Oxford house.
Do you mind if people contact you on JPay if they have any more questions for you?
No, not at all. I don't. My DOC number is 406117.
Is there anything you'd like to say before we end our conversation?
No.
I'd like to thank you for tuning in, and hopefully this was information that you could use for future endeavors. We are looking for people to help us to improve the penal system, to get the word out of situations that may not be very beneficial to the community and to the rehabilitation of the folks as they leave the prison system. So you're able to hear one side from one prison, from one incarcerated person, and I encourage you to reach out to her. She's given us permission to do the JPay, and so at the end here we'll give her JPay information. And pen pals are nice. Supportive relationships really help in the return to society. Anything that you can do to help reduce crime, reduce recidivism, to improve sentencing guidelines, all of this helps the community in the long run. There's no wasted time in working toward this goal. So go out, have yourself a wonderful day, and thank you for your support.